Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a very special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. As always, there's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, well, it's given away by the title. I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about development stories, production stories, marketing stories, release stories, all the ingredients, really, that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love. Just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. But what you've happened upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast where I bring in a guest to talk about their body of work and stroke or their latest release. A bit of both in this case. And I can't tell you what a thrill it is to be joined by writer, producer and director James L. Brooks, a real legend of modern Hollywood. Now, Brooks has we cover in the chat films like I'll Do Anything. We do a little bit of As Good As It Gets as well. Primarily, we're here to talk about the film that he's produced and helped bring to the screen, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Directed by Kelly Freeman Craig, his second collaboration with her after The Edge of 17, and based on the novel by Judy Blume. Now, the film arrives in UK cinemas on the 19th of May 2023. I really loved it as well, as I think comes across in the conversation. We are going to talk about one or two other films as well. I mean, just to give some background on I'll Do Anything, this was a fairly famous 1994 release that's quite hard to find now, which began life as a musical and went through an extensive post-production period. It stars Nick Nolte, Albert Brooks, and in particular Whitney Wright we talk about, the young child actor in the film, who gives a really extraordinary performance as well. Brooks also brings up the first film he's credited on, Starting Over, directed by Alan J. Pakula, starring Burt Reynolds as well. That dates back to 1979. We have a little touch on broadcast news from 1987 too, and he mentions The Simpsons, which he also, of course, produces and has done from day one. I quote his 2010 movie How Do You Know as well, starring Reese Witherspoon. I think that's all the setup you need, really. So, as always, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a clip from the film in question. In this case, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And then you'll go straight into my conversation with the legend that is James L. Brooks.
Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret.
I'm here to speak to you today about your changing bodies.
The blood is released through the vagina.
Please, just do this one thing for me. Let me just be normal and regular like everybody else. Just please, 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 please.
What I feel, I can't say.
I've decided I want you to join my secret club. If you want to be in the club, then you have to wear a bra.
Oh.
So that was a clip from Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. I'm delighted to be joined for the first time on this podcast, hopefully not the last, by its producer and a genuine Hollywood legend, James L. Brooks. Hello, James L. Brooks.
Good morning.
How do we find you, apart from in a very tidy and very nice-looking house with a working printer in the background?
Tired.
I think most of us can relate to that.
Busy day yesterday, just got up.
So your role in this particular picture is as producer, and this presumably has come out of your relationship with Kelly Freeman Craig, who you worked with on the extraordinary The Edge of 17, a really terrific film if people haven't heard that before, haven't seen that before. But one of the things that I remember you saying to Kelly Freeman Craig when she first came to you and she wrote to you on spec, as I understand. Sorry, I know you know all this, but I suspect listeners don't. She sent through her script to you and just almost out of nowhere. But you said to her, research. And whenever I read interviews or hear interviews that you've done, the key to a lot of the work that you do is research. So I wonder if we could start there on this particular one. When you're coming to a book that's so loved and so cherished, set in such a certain time, how pivotal is the research on something like this?
I think it was essential, and what happens is that I think what hopefully happens to the audience happened to Kelly and her friends, as with her, she started to ask all the questions they remembered about their adolescence, all the things that that is either profound or giggly quote girl talk. And some of them some of them very remarkable, some of them very simple. A lot of conversations about first periods, and surprisingly, a number of these conversations added to the film.
And so I don't think I'm doing massive spoilers here to say that this is a book that is so important to so many people, but also a book and a text that Judy Blume herself has been very protective of. I remember her sending out a social media post once upon a time saying she was open to the idea of an adaptation. What was it about you two that made her come into a working relationship with you?
Kelly wrote her a letter and Kelly writes great letters. Yeah. And Kelly wrote her a letter saying how much she wanted to do it, to adapt the book. And this ended up with some back and forth, and then the next thing we knew, Kelly and I were on a plane to Key West to see Judy and her husband George. Yeah, and at that meeting, because she's a national treasure here, she's beloved, and you become tongue-tied, and I was very awkward, and I felt it was my duty not to sell her on it so much as to tell her, well, here are the dangers of adaptation from Hollywood, and then I'd get caught and I'd stammer and I'd lose my way, and it was excruciating for me. I'm sure it couldn't have been as bad as I experienced it, because she was gracious, and then her husband. This went on for a while, and then her husband, who was sitting some feet away with his back to us, suddenly said his first words of the meeting, "We're doing this, aren't we?" So, and we were all cheering and hugging, and then the next 3 or 4 years happened.
So you said that Kelly there writes great letters. What do you remember about your first encounter with her? Because as I understand it, she did just send you the script and has talked of you as her filmmaking hero.
I think of this. I once. Do you know who Edward R. Murrow was?
That name rings a bell, yeah.
Edward R. Murrow was the World War II broadcast reporter who was a god in this.
Right. Okay.
In this country, he was the person who watched out for us, who was the voice of integrity, a brilliant, charismatic man. And there's a woman who wrote a biography of him that was 1,200 pages long.
Yeah.
And they said to this is a long-winded answer.
But
it does end, I promise.
No, good.
There's a woman the author was asked on an interview I heard, what was your biggest surprise? And she paused and she said that he deserved the legend. I feel that way about Judy Blume.
And also the fact that you say voice in there as well, because again, that comes through continually in interviews you've given throughout about your career and the people that you've worked with. In particular, I remember around the time of Edge of 17, which is a film I just stumbled on almost by random. And then I looked back at the story of that at the time, and you said it was Kelly's voice. It wasn't necessarily the words on a page per se, but the strength of the voice that was coming through it. I mean, was that your firm recollection?
Yes.
Yeah.
And having a voice is sort of, yeah. And that's maintained. I mean, it's been. I mean, she did a terrific film debut, and she did. As I say, her sophomore film put her past graduate school. She took another leap with that.
I mean, it's interesting because I was talking to a screenwriter last week because I mean, I'm on the outside of the film industry. I just do a long form podcast chat and I speak to really interesting people like yourself. And I'm reading things from like the Writers Guild of America saying artificial intelligence is coming into screenwriting and such like now. And I spoke to a screenwriter last week here in the UK, and he was adamant it was not a threat as long as you've got a voice. And I just wonder if you kind of see the world the same way.
Well, I think in regard to that, I think it's just tighten your seatbelt. I mean, it ain't going to be the same.
Yeah. But it doesn't. But I mean, does it worry you to any degree?
Yeah, it does. I guess. I mean, it's the simple stuff, but you can't predict. You know, in an ideal way, everybody has a mate, an artificial mate that can. How would you write it? You know.
There's so many ways this conversation could go from this point. So I'm going to. I mean, one of the things that one of the things that's always come through in your work as well, whether you're producing, writing, and directing, is patience. And I mean, I remember the first report coming through that you'd secured the rights to this book in. I think it was October 2018. I've got here. But then it was some 18 months before it was the point where you were even willing to consider a studio coming in to partner with you on it. How important was that 18 months of creating things outside of the glare of the rest of the filmmaking world?
Well, Kelly and I would talk through those 18 months. She would write, and we would have periodic talks. There'd be some pages, and then we talk some more. And it was ideal. It was like it was unhurried. You know, there was nothing we inflicted upon ourselves. And you know, we just watched her grow the thing, and talking about it at every stage, and we sort of always work that way at the little shop that, you know, Gracie Films, where I work, and everybody's sort of used to it, and I like it,
because Gracie Films has always been writers first, hasn't it?
Writers first, yeah,
and that's from you. That's your hobby.
Yeah, that was everybody's lawyer was trying to make them start a company, and I tried to figure out some reason besides my lawyer wanted me to do this, and then we came up with let's do writers first, and everybody who's made a film with us has been a writer. And everyone has had control over their film, either as a director or producer, and usually for the first time as director.
And so, because again, listeners to this may not be aware of the work you had in mentoring Wes Anderson through Bottle Rocket and your work with Cameron Crowe as well. But is it kind of writers and directors you're gravitating towards, people who can control that whole voice?
Writers. Writers who become directors, yeah.
So when you've talked in the past about, sorry, I'm quoting loads of your own words back at you here, but you've talked in the past about the separating out of those jobs, because the writer, you kind of like boxing yourselves into corner that the director then has to sort out, but oftentimes the director is you or Wes Anderson or in this case Kelly. Are you still fairly stringent that those jobs have to separate in that way, even if you know that, say in this case, Kelly's going to direct as well?
Well, writing is alone, and you know, then notes come in what people say. I believe in that. So any good note can come from any place, you know, even if it aggravates you at the time. So rewriting is a thing, but then when you start to make a movie out of it, it's such a team sport.
Yeah,
it's you know, like I try not to carry grudges.
That's a setup.
But I wrote the first full theatrical distribution wrote was a picture called Starting Over.
Was that the one you were fired off and they didn't tell you?
No, that was one that I never got to make.
Oh, even better. Yeah.
Yes. And going to see a doctor after this, but I had a monologue that I cared about so much, and it was a woman's monologue said to Burt Reynolds, who where she poured her heart out, and then ended up, pounding on his chest. And I was the producer, but I wasn't the director. And he came to work today in something that always bothers me when you see it in film: the newest trench coat you can possibly imagine. This was just off the whatever machine makes it. And it was slick and unwrinkled and unlived in. And it looked ridiculous when she pounded it, because the thing would not accept a punch. You cannot wrinkle the damn thing. And I swear to God, as I'm reliving, and we were shooting it in real cold weather, and I'm reliving my inept rage.
I'm feeling really bad. I'm taking you down this road.
and so a lesson learned.
So I mean, there's a bit in I'd Do Anything where you've got Albert Brooks as the movie studio executive. I think I've got the right film, where he's ranting and raving about, I don't make films for people who drink cappuccino in the foyer. I make films for people who eat popcorn in the theatre. And I'm curious just how your consideration of the audience changes. Because when I heard that, and I only watched it for the first time like a day or two ago, I thought, well, they sell cappuccino in the theatre now. You take it in. I mean, everything about making films over the last 50 years, and certainly the way that films talk to audiences, just seems to have changed slightly. I wonder if
the term popcorn. There is the term
that's still just about there.
Where you can see people die on the screen as you're filling your face with.
I mean, the glee in which you say that. But I guess if I've got a terrible question in the midst of it, it's just like, I mean, are you conscious that do you think the audience has changed? Does the way that you produce and put your films together alter over, say, the last 10, 20 years?
Sure, it has, and sure, the stuff about attention span, and sure the need to have the need for a lot of the audience to want to really know in advance of how they're going to be pleasured by the film they're going to see. I think that becomes more and more the broad girth of the business. But there's still room. There's still room to chase an idea. There's still room to try and chase some characters and see what happens to them.
I come back to patience then on that, because one of the things that I see, again, as an audience member, is that technology's come along and accelerated so much of filmmaking, but seems to, as a result of that, have cut the thinking time out of it. That it seems like you can edit a film in half the time now, you can write a film potentially in half the time, and it's always the thinking time that seems to get compromised. I'm just curious if that's I mean, that's just my perception on the outside looking in. Is that accurate to your mind? I mean, is it a fight for time as much as it is a fight for money at the moment?
Well, money is always there. I hope this fall to be doing a movie that it took me so long to write, that only the person I'm most intimate with in the world knows the length of time. And
well, that person isn't me. So, but I did see a news report in 2017, I think it was, that you were looking to write and direct something else.
Well, let's see, we could be charitable about that. We could say I was looking, and then maybe I found something in 2020, 21, and then maybe I just got sidetracked. And the truth is unmentionable.
So that's okay. So when I think it was when you were making Terms of Endearment, I think it was Larry Gordon who said to you that on the day that you step on set to direct for the first time, a big bus will come up and it's filled with all the producers of your movie. And I think I've got part of that accurate, but you're on the producing side of the fence here. And I looked at the credits for this particular film, and there's a long list of producers. So what do you bring as a producer? Are you the protective cloak on something like this? Who are the people who step off that bus, if you will?
Exactly. I think I think you put it perfectly. I'll tell you something which, I'm sort of, Mike Nichols, who was a god to me, and I like, there are he was the most beloved person I think our business had, because there's many of us. But he would ask, if you were doing a picture, he would ask you, who's your buddy on the picture? And by that he meant the person who you could say anything to, who could say anything to you, who was watching what happened, and you could have the conversations that of your 3 o'clock in the morning anxieties or whatever they were, and how important that person was. And I try and be that person when I'm a producer. I try and be that buddy.
Do you enjoy that role on a film when you're shepherding talent who perhaps otherwise wouldn't be able to get their film made?
Let's see. It's automatic. I aspire to it. I try. That's what I think of. Yeah.
Because I just wonder if that's one of those roles that looks delightful on paper, but actually you're having to fend off all the business side to protect, like, the artist on the set, if you will.
Yes, and there are other ways to do it. So when there's a large budget on the line, sometimes there are producers whose job it is to spank for the studio, and sometimes there are producers that do a very good job of explaining each society to the other, and is a wonderful diplomatic intermediary, and is totally professional, and I've had the pleasure of that. And sometimes the producer is there to defend the director. But I always think the deal is you can't get smug and you can't get arrogant and you can't about it because everybody counts. It is such a team sport. And so many examples of the idea that saved the moment and maybe the scene coming from anywhere in the crew.
Yeah. I love a line that you put near the front of How Do You Know? I've forgotten the character's name, it's terrible, but she just turned around at one point and just says, "I've lost my ability to smile at bastards." And then just lets out the most enormous grin. And I'm just like, that only a filmmaker surely could write that in quite that way. I did wonder, particularly as I did that as a double bill with I'll Do Anything, if that, like, all of your filmmaking experiences were being poured into some of those lines. I mean, one of the things that really interests, because I thought this film was really extraordinary, and there were two things about it that particularly appealed to me. Number one is just the broad appeal of it. And I think this kind of story, to have that level of broad appeal, I think is really important personally. And I'm just like a white middle-aged male. The book wasn't for me, and I come to it from the outside. But also it's PG rated over here. And one of my bugbears of modern cinema as a parent is live action PG rated films that actually have something to say are just the most scarcest of things. And I read Hollywood trade reports that it's adult dramas and such like that are under threat. And I see that. I completely see that. But the PG-rated live-action family movie is just the most uncherished thing. Did you go into it aiming for that rating? Was that part and parcel of what you and Kelly were looking to do?
I think there's PG-13 here.
Yeah, and it's PG here. Yeah.
Yeah. It was inevitable. It's what it was inevitable. Though the picture discusses I think the glory of the picture is that it discusses in an embracing human way something that happens to every woman that has never before been talked about in film. With all the male coming of age pictures that we've had, those armies of male coming of age pictures, this is the first true girl coming of age picture.
And so,
in terms of every detail of it, in terms of saying casually the unmentionable parts of it.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I'm sure you feel the frustration as well, but it's bizarre we've had to wait for 2023 just to have this as so matter of fact on screen, periods and sanitary pads and such like. And that's something I can take my kids to see. I mean, that's the killer for me, that it's that broad. And I'm guessing you had no pushback from it by the way that you put the film together and by the fact that you were adapting a Judy Blume.
No, I think it's a breath of relief, collective breath of relief that you can absolutely relate it to. And with this picture, the ridiculousness of that being an unmentionable is,
Yeah.
the spotlight is on that.
This podcast is film stories, and one of the things I try and talk about is the human being stories behind films and how you get through some of that. And one of the first time, apart from a secondhand ex-rental copy of Broadcast News that I managed to get on the cheap, the first time I was aware of your work growing up was reading magazine articles about I'll Do Anything. And it felt like on that, I knew all the problems of the film and all the difficulties you'd had of the film before I got to the film. And in fact, here in the UK, it's been quite a difficult film to get hold of. And I always wonder, because now I just watch the film without that baggage, and I can just see it and enjoy it, and did enjoy it. The young girl you've gotten is extraordinary. But I just wonder what it's like being the human being at the heart of that, when you're in the midst of that ecosystem and people aren't talking about the film, they're talking about everything but what you're putting on screen.
I don't want to be glib because you're being very sensitive about it. It was so seriously, it was awful. It was the most extraordinarily difficult time of my my working life, and because I was trying to do a musical,
yes,
and I later learned what I did wrong, but I also foolishly didn't care if the actors could sing, because it was all the acting to me. I think as long as they were acting it, so you'll never see more people who only sing in the shower singing professionally, and then I had a preview where everything was going good. I even signaled my editor we got through the first musical scene and it was terrific. And then the actors who couldn't sing started to sing, and then people got, and I count laughs, but these were ones I didn't want to count, and these were laughs I didn't want to get. And then there were these walkouts. People started walking out, and I sat there in that kind of describable hell, and then apologized to the people I had made the film with, because they had worked hard and I got in it with me, but and then went to work, as I always do, because I always do 5-6 previews. Pictures change dramatically. I'm used to it. I use that as part of my process. But then the paper, our biggest paper in Los Angeles, had somebody at that screening and wrote about it, and then somehow was able to follow me in each screening I had as I wrestled with the problem, which was to actually only a few songs remained at the end, and they were good songs written for the film, and it was about. And my notes, the only reason I was doing a musical is because I thought it was a story trying to tell the truth about Hollywood, and I thought the only way you could tell the truth was to have musical form, because the thing is unreal to begin with. So that was my intention. And then I got a wonderful letter from somebody who actually liked the film a lot, and his father had been a prime musical writer, and the father had said the one thing with any musical, Hollywood musical, is you must keep the story as simple as possible. And I thought that was interesting. But I still remember it as, I think everybody has to take a turn at bat. This is what Hollywood is, and so I took that turn at bat.
And if you don't mind me asking, how do you reflect on the film now? Do you like the film, or is it just kind of tarnished by what you went through? Can you not step away from that?
Whatever sticks. I don't look back really, but things stick. Things stick about that film that you'd want to have surgically removed, but things stick. Yeah.
I mean, it's because the thing that struck me, and I can come to it completely cold without everything you've had to go through on it, is just the core relationship at the heart of it between Nick Nolte and his daughter in that film. Is two really tender performances. And I always wonder about directing child actors at the best of time, but the fact that the two of them are so central in that film, appreciating most people listening to this won't have heard it, there's something really quite special there. Which I wasn't expecting, because again, I took some tracking down to get the film, but 20, 30 years ago I'd forgotten the stories, but just came to it cold. And I'm just wondering if there's like pride in just even that central heart of the film.
Yes, I say the only time I ever fell for the leading lady was that picture and that little girl.
She was amazing.
When she came to the set, I'd light up. her mother was fantastic. Her mother was a police officer, and
Yeah.
she was a great woman. And the child was, that child had to cry in a very important scene. Very important scene.
Yeah, I remember the one.
Cried tears at the end of a moving shot when the camera reached her, and I'll never forget our process that day to making that happen.
Do you mind me asking what the process was? What?
Her mother would. I talked to her mother about how to approach it after a lot of takes.
Yeah,
and she's playing. The actress is playing a child actress in a scene where she's required to cry, and it's a scene where there's been a death someplace.
Yes.
So, and she was 7. Yeah. And I had her mother sitting in a chair on an empty stage within her eye line, and I said, you might not know what death is. And death is like an empty chair. And then her mother got up and left the chair, and the girl cried.
No.
Yeah.
That's the small moments and the truth that you always talk about that you're going for. That's presumably a prime example.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
That's incredible. So one of the things I try and do with this podcast as well is for those of us on the outside of film to kind of make it a bit more reachable. Because again, I grew up in a period in a part of the world where filmmaking wasn't a thing, and we don't know how people come out of difficult experiences. And then you went from I'd Do Anything to like one of your most loved films, As Good as It Gets. And I think it's an old Hitchcock thing that the film you do next is a response to the one you've just done before. And I'm just curious, was there an element of that to it? Because by the sounds of it, As Good as It Gets was a bit of a wrestling match to get it to where you wanted it to get to too.
I don't think if you have a bad memory that the things didn't go well. You just have to serve your time. It's a prison sentence.
Yeah.
And then you serve your time, and one day you're out of jail and you go to work again.
It's an extraordinary contrast that you did those two films back to back. And presumably each took exactly the same amount of effort, and each was almost like determined by the response that other people gave to your work. So where does this all leave you now? I'm conscious we're just about to run out of time, but you've hinted there. Well, you've said there that you're looking to make a film again yourself. Does working with people like Kelly really put fresh energy into your work as well? Does that alter the kind of stuff that you want to do?
I've done a lot of and I also do The Simpsons, which
of course, yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah,
I have a full-time job on The Simpsons.
Yeah,
and so it's taken me a long time to write the script. I mean, it's the longest, and I'd always take a long time. So this is the longest, but written it is a little too long. It is, and I expect to be filming it in October.
And are you as looking forward to that process as you always were, say, when you were doing the likes of Ordinary People?
I think of it. I think that's a big deal. It's team sport. We all work for the movie, serving the characters. I feel it as a very welcome responsibility.
And you know the writer of this one very well as well.
Poor bastard. Yeah.
James L. Brooks, this has been a real delight, and thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking to you.
And that was my conversation with James L. Brooks. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret is in UK cinemas from the 19th of May 2023. I do hugely recommend the film. And that also brings to the end this special episode of Film Stories. You can find more from me on Twitter at Simon Brew, more from Film Stories at Film Stories. We're at filmstories.co.uk. Our website is updated regularly with movie news, features, reviews and things like that. And if you go to store.filmstories.co.uk, that's where you can find our print magazines for sale. We've got new issues of Film Stories and Film Junior magazines that are just being produced as this is being recorded. But I think that's enough for now. I won't keep you hanging on. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support. I'll be back soon with your regular episode of Film Stories. Until then, you all take care. Bye-bye.